Hey guys, Jim here. Right now we're going to do something that I've been anticipating for a couple of weeks now. This is going to be yet another in our series of guest blades. And I got to tell you, this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be comparing the Zero Tolerance R.J. Martin design 0600 to actual R.J. Martin Q36s. Now, these are my three Q36s. The main difference between them, just to get that right out of the way, is mine are all liner locks. They do offer a frame lock version, which is what this was based off of. So this is going to be slimmer in proportion and have a different locking mechanism than these three. But otherwise, you know, this is where this design initiated. And the first thing that you're going to see right away is there is a tremendous difference in the sizes. When you look at the Zero Tolerance, you have a 4¼ inch blade. It is massive. It's big and it's very heavy. On the R.J. Martins, on the originals, you have a 3 7/8 inch blade, which I already thought was pretty big until I picked up the ZT. It's a really, really startling difference. They're the same blade profiles. You're still going to be getting a double hollow ground recurve. With the ZT, see if we have the blade steel over here. Yep, you're going to get the B75P steel. Now, I've never had a knife with that particular steel, so I can't tell you from experience how it holds up. It's supposed to be a pretty well-balanced steel. It doesn't rock wall out really high, but you've got good edge retention. You're supposed to have a fairly good chip resistance. And it's supposed to be a good stainless as well, so it's going to be nice and corrosion resistant. When you look at the R.J. Martins, all three of mine happen to be, see if we can get it to focus. There we go, CTS 204P. Now, if you watched my R.J. Martin review already, you already know about the performance of that steel. I'm really not going to go over that again, and it's also my way of getting you to watch another one of my videos. Ha-ha! So, you've got a big difference there in the blade size, and that's going to also translate into the overall. Overall, this thing is just such a monster. 9½ inches overall, where the Q36 is 8¾ inches. And again, that's still a big knife. But you don't realize how big can be in this design until you pick up the ZT. Now, that's the other part of it. This thing is a monster in its weight. 6 7/8 of an ounce. That is very heavy. 5 ounces. Now, granted, there's actually kind of a trade-off. The titanium overall in the R.J. Martin is much thicker than on the ZT, but you've got a lot of carbon fiber here, reducing a lot of the weight. You only have a little bit of carbon fiber here. This has a huge, very thick, very heavy backspacer. I'm going to have to assume it's titanium like the scales. I'm just going to go with that. It might be steel, but it could be titanium. I didn't really see anything that told me otherwise. And on the RJs, I have different ones here. This is going to be the carbon fiber backspacer. This is going to be the G10 backspacer. And this one has the lightning strike carbon fiber backspacer. So they're going to have kind of almost, it's like almost a trade-off when it comes to the weight and how they're constructed. Okay. We already went over the whole liner lock versus frame lock thing. For those that don't know, the Chris Reeve frame lock. This does have an over travel built in, so you can't overextend the lock bar, which is a really nice thing to have. And then you have liner lock because you have titanium on both sides and carbon fiber on both sides. And he built these as a liner lock. So, let's pull one of these out just for right now, just to save us some room. We'll put these guys in here together. That's a little bit easier to work with. Okay, so where are we at here? Now, they're both running on bearing systems. RJ is using a special thrust bearing system, all sealed, encapsulated. When you open it up, they're not going to go falling out like IKBS. That's great. And then the ZT is also using a similar type of system. It's called the KVT bearing system. It's the Kershaw Velocity Technology. Honestly, they're almost identical in the way that they operate. So there's no real big need to go into that. It's basically a plastic washer holding the multitude of bearings on either side of the blade. So when you open the knife, they don't just go scattering. So how do they perform? All right, well, we know that R.J. Martin Q36s are heralded as being one of the best flippers that money can buy. Many people would say they are hands down the best. You know, there are a lot of really great knives out there that most of us are never going to get a chance to handle. So to say definitively one is the best is nearly impossible. But it certainly is commented by most everybody, one of the best. Now, I barely have to perform any action, and I'm stroking back, by the way. I'm not pushing in. You really can't push down on this one. It's not a plunger style. So we're just going to kind of rock back on it. I'm just going to put a little bit of tension. You ready? And you hear that very solid opening. What you're hearing a ka-chunk. The ka is actually, you're hearing the blade breaking loose from that massive detent, and the chunk is it flying open and locking up against the blade stop. I'll put it up here so we can hear it a little bit better. Yeah, that's what a flipper is all about. Now, this is based off of that knife, so we have pretty high expectations. Oh. Yeah. See if pushing down on it you can do. It's still not going to give you the same results. Now, it is smooth. Certainly a very smooth operation. It's just slow and not snappy. Now, I want to be very fair here. You've got to realize this is a full-on production knife that they can mass produce. I don't know what limitations they're going to put on these, but listen, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you got 3 Q36s, you're biased. Here's the deal. Before I ever owned my first Q36, this was announced, and I was excited about it because it's really, really difficult to get your hands on a Q36, and when you do, you're going to do what I do. When I bought my first one, this was my first one, I had to pay a dude $1,400 for it. That's a crap load of money. So let's be realistic about this. I had very, very high hopes for this knife. When it was announced, I went nuts. I didn't do a pre-order on it because I was certain that I was going to find a Q36 at some point. But I got excited as that release time came around, and the first couple guys that got them, I'm like, dude, tell me, what's the flipping like? Is it anything like a real RJ? And they went, no. It's just not. It looks like an R.J. Martin, but it's bigger, it's heavier in a silly way, and it doesn't flip with nearly the same action. Now let's take the real R.J. out of the equation. Is this a solid knife? Oh, hell yeah. This thing is built like a friggin' tank. I mean, it really is. It is overbuilt. They did some great work here in the titanium with this kind of pyramid style. Let's see if we can get some nice macros of that. And you can see the height of all that work. They did a really, really nice job on that. Sloppy on the fit and finish, however. Look how the carbon fiber scale meets up into the frame. There are gaps all the way around it. It's not flush. There's a very noticeable lip where the carbon fiber is either too thick or they didn't recess the titanium enough where they set it in there. Very poor fit and finish on that. Now, but Jim, it's a production knife. Not just any production knife. This is a $400 production knife, guys. That is your top tier pricing in production knives. Now, also factor into the equation, people started snapping these up as soon as they were made available, eliminated the availability, and they started flipping them for $500 to $700. So now, you're that guy perusing eBay, you find one even at the low end, $500. you're expecting better fit and finish than that. That's just the way it is. Also factor in there's still a significant difference in price, but you got to go by maker's price. Maker's price, or I should say retail price from ZT, $400. Maker's price from RJ Martin on a standard carbon fiber with the orange peel titanium is $850. Getting into lightning strike carbon fiber with orange peel titanium, $875. So apples to apples is the only way we can go, because these are already going for more money. We know these you're going to pay anywhere from $1,400 to $1,800, $1,900 for. So that's too volatile for you to try to really do a comparison. So 400 versus 850. We'll get that one out of there. So 400 versus 850 is what you're really looking at. That is a substantial difference, and that's enough for somebody to go, I'm going to buy the zero tolerance because I just simply can't, afford that much, or I can't justify spending that much on a knife. So let's now take RJ completely out of the equation and judge this knife based on its own merits. And I'm going to do the same on the RJs here in a moment. Okay, so you've got a big, heavy knife. A lot of people are not going to want to EDC this. It is massive. Now, I'm the kind, that doesn't really faze me all that much. I don't mind carrying a huge knife. I typically wear jeans, so it's not that big of a deal. If I were wearing lightweight shorts or something like that, that's when I'm going to reach for one of my smaller, lighter weight knives. But I would still want to have something like this in my collection. I feel like I could beat this around, batter it around, and it's not going to give me a single hiccup. And zero tolerance is really, really good about that. You go back to the 0200s, the 0350s, the older models, they're just made like tanks. They're made to be used. They've only turned into collector's items in certain particular models because that's what the collectors have done with them. But they've made brute, tough knives that just stand up to wear and abuse. This has got a great pocket clip, perfect amount of retention, not overly tight. You can slide this in and out of your jeans, no problem at all. The tension on the lock bar, nearly perfect. It's not taxing, but it's certainly enough to get that detent ball in there. Let's take a good look at the lockup and peer over the camera here. Nearly 50% lockup. That's kind of late when you really look at it, but I think perfectly acceptable. And again, super smooth action. Now, part of that is the length and the weight of this blade, with the fulcrum being all the way back there. Once you make it past that fulcrum, yeah, that blade just wants to drop, and a lot of that is that weight and the tip being so far away from the pivot. But it's also very, very smooth. The KVT system is phenomenal. They make a really, really good bearing system. I think if you take out of the equation the fitment of the carbon fiber, let's just look at this side. The fit and finish is fantastic. It looks really good. I like the fact that they do this hexagonal shaped pivot on the opposite side. Why? Because I don't need a second tool now. I can simply adjust my pivot with one tool on one side, and it holds this side in place for me. That's ingenious, and I don't know why more people don't do that. You look at the RJ, well, you can't access the pivot. You actually have to take the bolsters off, take the knife apart to get into that pivot. But that, again, that's a knife you don't want to go screwing with. That's a hand-tuned detent. There's a lot of work that went into that knife that I am not qualified to go messing with. This, I would feel fine, field stripping this, tearing it down, cleaning it up, relubing it, reassembling it, all in just a few minutes. Probably wouldn't be an issue at all. As far as the ergos go, in my hand, I wear a size large glove. It's a little big for me. This is just unnecessary for my particular grip. You do have a nice secure feeling with the choil that's up here and the flipper acting as a finger guard. You can use it as a forward choil because they did block off the backside of the blade at the lead-in, which is fantastic. Kudos to ZT for doing that. I can't tell you how many high-end expensive custom knife makers have not gotten the freaking memo on that. Guys, if you're gonna put a choil up here, I'm gonna use it. I don't want to slice my fucking finger open. Thank you. All right, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell for me on the ZT. Now, you guys know how I am. I've always been unbiased, and I do my absolute very best to be honest at all times about the knives that I have coming out here in front of my camera. I love this knife. I truly love this knife. I'm infatuated with the R.J. Martin Q36. But I can still point out the flaws. I believe I've paid enough here between these three to earn the right to be critical. There's nothing that I can say about this knife that I hate. Absolutely not, or I wouldn't have three of them. Now, one is going to be going bye-bye. I'm sending one of these to a friend, and I'm just keeping one of each of the others. I love it. It's an astounding knife. The action is beyond anything that I've ever owned in my collection. It's beyond anything I've ever actually handled. And until you've flipped an R.J. Martin, you can't comment. You have to do it. You just have to. You have to know what that feels like, what that sounds like. It's nearly orgasmic. But there are also things about this knife that aren't so great. Let's see if you can pick out the first one I'm going to nail. Yeah, you guys know me. It's the pocket clip. Listen, this is a premium, custom, hand-built knife. Anybody wants to argue hand-built, I don't care how much was done on the CNC. When you put all these side by side, there are variances among all three, showing that everything was hand-fitted, everything was done by hand. I don't care what you say. I've got three sitting here, all with their own unique variances, and that proves to me just how much of it was handmade. The clip is cheap. It's like it was an afterthought. This is a parts bin special spring clip. There's nothing special about that, and there's nothing that justifies it on such an amazing knife. Period. Think of how much thought went into the shape and profiling of this hollow grind recurve. The thought that went into exactly how the jimping was done, how the bolsters were going to line up with the scales. Everything about this. That needs to change. I'm sorry, that really, really needs to change. The other thing, and I didn't notice it right away in the first few days that I had my first one, it was Sebastian that actually brought this up. He says, have you gotten the dreaded pinch yet? I'm like, no, what are you talking about? Did you see that? That's the pinch. And I've got torn up thumbs from all my knives, from all the playing that I do with them. But the poor design of this, I want you to take a good look all the way around this. Every edge is beautifully contoured, soft. On the inside of the tie, on the inside of the liner lock. But guess what? This area he left sharp. And that's going to unfortunately be where the fatty part of your thumb is going to go when you're applying pressure on the liner lock. So it ends up tearing the hell out of your finger. It's to the point where you don't want to play with your knife as much as you'd like to because you're really tired of it pinching the shit out of your thumb. That is a tragic flaw in my opinion. That's something, and it's easily rectified. All RJ would have to do is simply dehorn that one area, round it off and contour it like every other part of this entire knife. Everything is just done perfectly. It's seamless integration of all the components, and everything is rounded off and done beautifully. Until you get to that one critical part, and that's one of the most important parts for me. The backside of the liner lock is sharp, and the front side or inside of that bolster is sharp. And I mean sharp. That shouldn't happen. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. So don't think that just because I have these that I'm going to be partial to them. There's as fair and balanced as I can make it. I think the ZT is one hell of a great knife. I don't think it's $400 great. I don't think it's worth, tremendously more than a paramilitary too. You know what? Apples to apples. 0560, 0561. This costs considerably more, and I don't think it's that much better of a knife. I think it's large and unwieldy for most people. Again, for me, not a problem. I don't mind carrying a big knife. You guys have seen my knives. But I think it's too large and unwieldy for the masses. I think it's they really need to work on the fit and finish with the carbon fiber inlay. But when you take away those couple really kind of minor nitpicks, if the price was $100 less, we would all overlook the little things like that, and this would probably be one of the most popular and most talked about knives on the market. And I think it would have been even better received. But I think a lot of people laid out a shitload of money, got this, and went, uh-oh. Well, I could have saved up another 2 paychecks and got that. So there is a very big difference. You got to realize Todd Begg just released the field grade Bodega for $500. $100 more, and it's a freaking G10 Bodega. ZT needs to work on their price points on that. I'm sure they had to pay a lot of royalties to RJ Martin, but that's kind of their problem, not ours. But I think on its own, this is a well-built, solid knife that is up for pretty much any task you could throw at it. I wouldn't tell people not to buy it. I would just tell people, shop around for the best value. You get the right price on this, and I think it's going to be one of the happiest purchases you've ever made. All right, guys, I'm going to cut it off here before my camera cuts me off. Thanks so much, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below.